Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I have three books on my table, and I don't know which I should read first. Spoiled for choice. So maybe I will just perhaps say a few words. I think there are some new faces, so maybe I will just give some background information. If you are new to Buddhism, or if you're not so familiar with the Lamrim teachings, then maybe I can say something on that. First of all, the Lamrim teachings here were meant for someone who I think already has a Buddhist background. It's meant for someone who already has a Buddhist background, has a certain level of belief, faith in the three jewels. So the Lamrim text was composed for someone with that background. So those of us who are quite new to the Dharma, then for everyone, maybe Lamrim isn't where you should start with, where you should start from. But then I think, again, there are exceptions for those of you who might not have had a strong Buddhist background when you studied. But if you have a different kind of background, that is karmic imprint, then I think even though you might not have a strong Buddhist background, these teaching will appeal to you. You will find that these teaching makes sense. And I think there are many examples. His Holiness, when he gives teachings to a Western audience, or maybe when he gives an introduction to Buddhism, then usually His Holiness would talk about the two truths, and then the Four Noble Truths, and so forth, like that. And His Holiness, of course, with his wisdom, then discerns these three aspects that you find in the teaching of the Buddha, which is Buddhist science, Buddhist philosophy, and Buddhist practice. I think that approach has a purpose. Of course, His Holiness is not differentiating these three so that these three can be used to sort of hook people in, so to speak, by first presenting the science part to sort of make it appealing to people, and then trying to deepening that with the philosophy, and then using, of course, the path. I don't think that is the intent. But still, with this three approach, if you are the right vessel, if you are the right pot, then with this approach, this is a very good approach. This is a very good way to get to the teaching of the Buddha. It is the way of, I think, a person of maybe higher capacity in terms of intelligence. So that's just one thing I wanted to share. And then when you say science, then I think it has, if you don't analyze the world that we live in, then there is no need for science. It is when you start to analyze, especially the physical world that we live in, that's when science comes into the picture, and you use the methods that is explained in science to understand the physical world. So that is one form of analysis. And then with philosophy, then I think that may be a way of analyzing maybe perhaps the non-physical or the abstract. It is, you use the method, or you use philosophy itself. You use that as a base, and then you start the analysis. With the practice part, then using those two forms of analysis, then you start to change whatever it is that you have learned from those analysis, whatever that you have learned from those methods, whatever that you have come to the conclusion, from all those thinking and just looking beyond our senses, whatever that you have learned from that, then it is when you start to apply that to your daily life on a daily basis. When you, with those two former, I think it may change the way you see things, right? With science and with philosophy, well, with just those two, then it may affect the way you see the physical realm and then the non-physical realm. But it only affects to a certain level. It only affects on a superficial level. Maybe it changes your brain somewhat, but not your heart, There might, or in other ways, if I put it in a different way, then you might have sort of, with those two methods, you might have glimpses of reality, of some form of reality. But without the practice bit, you cannot continue having that appearance. You cannot continue to see that or prolong what you have found, what you have seen. It is just a glimpse with the first two methods. So, if this way of seeing the truth, if you can only see it for a short time, then obviously it is not a part of your life. Maybe only for a few seconds, but it doesn't become the theme of the day, It wouldn't pervade your thoughts. It wouldn't pervade the way you see things. It wouldn't become yourself, You don't become what you're seeing, What you're seeing and what you are remains separate. So, with practice, diligently practicing and repeating that mental process over and over and over again, then that distance, between yourself and what you're believing, what you're seeing, that distance gradually begins to diminish. So you can only do that. You can only come to that. You can only come to that level only by practicing. Also, in the West, people may practice the Dharma for a different reason. Those of us who were born and raised in a Buddhist background, in a Buddhist family, then I think more often than not, it is easy to just practice the Dharma, to recite the Dharma, to show our respects to the Sangha, to our gurus. It sort of comes automatically, right? It is part of our culture. So it is not difficult to do those things. And especially we don't have that language barrier, you know. It's easier to recite in Tibetan than in English. And of course, much easier to memorize in Tibetan, since we have these rules so that everything has a rhythm, right? It rhymes, right? Whereas if you translate that root text into English, then it sort of becomes like the commentary, you know? So it's more of a challenge then, yeah. But those of us who do not have this Buddhist background, this culture, this Buddhist culture background, then it is more of a challenge to practice the Dharma, because you have to overcome first the culture barrier, right? The culture barrier. And then there's the language barrier. And there are other issues, I think, that many of us face. But His Holiness stresses this point, you know, that Buddhism is not a cultural thing. When the Buddha gave his first teaching on the Four Noble Truths, His Holiness would say, there is nothing cultural about the Four Noble Truths. You know, the Four Truths isn't an Indian thing. It is not a Tibetan. It is not a Tibetan thing. It is not an American thing. You know, there is nothing cultural about the Four Truths. They are simply truths. You know, they are simply truths that if you think about it, if you think about our situation, if you think about our world, if you analyze, and if you can get perhaps biased thoughts out of your system, then I think anyone who meet these conditions then can, I think, accept, you know, even if they don't accept the Four Truths as the Four Noble Truths, but in reality, then I think they would accept, you know, maybe in meaning they would accept, even though they might not be using the same terms, right? So this is, I think, why the teachings of the Buddha is still relevant today. You know, it's still relevant after over 2,500 years. It is still relevant here in America, which is, I'm sure, this place here. It's quite different from Deer Park, you know, 2,500 years ago. It's quite different. But if you go beyond the things that you see on the media, the things that we are led to believe in, the things that we see on TV advertisements, that constant bombardment of all this information that's trying to convince you to do something, that is trying to sell you a dream, that is trying to tell you what you should do, what you should buy, what you should get, and trying to define what happiness is. If you can go beyond that, then the teachings of the Buddha, that's when the teachings of the Buddha become relevant, right? So I think how His Holiness teaches nowadays. Also, to the Tibetans in India, His Holiness encourages this approach to think, to analyze, to not just have faith in the Dharma because your parents asked you to do so, to not recite something because the people around you, your neighbors, are reciting that, but to actually understand, try to understand the teaching of the Buddha, to try to understand his intent. This is very important, and I think that you are all doing that, you are all doing that. There's obviously a reason why we are all here, why we have all gathered here, and that is to practice the Dharma together. That is to gain an understanding, to learn from each other. This is very important. Sangha, in a more strict sense, refers to the monastic community, but in a more broad sense, then it would mean community, a group, So a group of people who are not satisfied, if I may say that, who are not satisfied by the pleasures of this world, by what we can achieve in this life. I think this is the group that we ought to be. This is the type of person that we should really try to become, Someone who is not easily swayed by the seemingly, when we see, everything looks so good, right? The luxuries of this life. When you look on what they show on TV, what they show on those advertisements, it's important that I think we have to see these advertisements before we sort of try to negate them, right? We have to see them first, and then we have to then see through them. This is very important, because some people, with their approach, they say you should not watch TV, you should not look at anything, just practice the Dharma. But then sometimes with this approach, there is a danger in that. When you stop the world and when you're in this Dharma environment, it's okay. But if you are suddenly put out there, in the world, in the real world, which I mean by like real samsara, if you had always been sort of living in this bubble, like let's say in my monastery, where of course we have less distractions, and our community tries to follow the teachings of the Buddha and try to put that into practice, with the always trying to engage in the 3 higher trainings and so forth. But the danger of living in that bubble is that if you do not confront the real world, then if you are unprepared, then you could fall for that. You could fall in that. But with you are very much part of this. This is part of your everyday life. You see this constantly. The moment you step on in the street, then you start to see the whole lamrim. The lamrim then starts to what's the word? Unfold, right? It then starts to unfold. Yes. I mean, this is like lamrim in a paper book form, right? But if you step out there on the street, then that's like lamrim in 3D, 3D, something like that. Yeah. Yes. So this is the purpose of this great teaching. It is to teach us. It is a way of overcoming suffering. It is, in a nutshell, this teaching is really about overcoming our suffering. If you look at the lamrim, if you look at the outline, then there is a purpose in that order, right? In that order, why it was laid out in that order. It was laid in that order, I think, of course, for the benefit of the student, so that the student need not think about, or when the student practices, the student does not have to worry about how to practice the Buddha's teachings. It is laid out so that you can gradually cover all the important meditation points. And it is not a random order. I think those of you who are quite new uh, to Lamrim, then I think sometimes there is this question about some points, especially Guru devotion, I think there might be some doubts that Guru devotion is actually is an Eastern thing, It's an Eastern thing. And if you look, then that might seem true. Guru devotion is emphasized not only in Buddhism, but also in Hinduism. It is very much a part of Indian culture. It is. The Indians, like a classical singer, would have a very strong Guru devotion to his or her Guru, right? And you see that, So it is very much a part of Indian culture. Now, here in the West, you don't display the same physical way of showing perhaps appreciation or love for your teacher. When you go through these chapters, then I think there can be a way. I'm now talking to the beginners. I'm not talking to the more experienced ones. For a beginner, if for those who can feel, right? Those of you who can feel this cultural gap when it comes to the various ways of expressing Guru devotion, then I think a good approach is that you don't, perhaps from the first day, you don't need to do exactly like a Tibetan would do in terms of showing respect to the Guru. But the essence of Guru devotion is not about folding one's hands or making prostrations, or bowing one's body to the point that I think sometimes you have to bow so low that it might even look painful, or I don't know. It might seem like you are trying to form some alphabet, Yeah. So that is not the point of Guru devotion. And if someone new to Buddhism sees that, then he might be wondering, well, why is this person doing this to this person? What is the relation? It might seem a little strange. And this is again part of, this is like culture shock, right? This is culture shock. But the point of Guru devotion is, I think, ultimately that you should have respect, deep respect for your Guru. But this respect need not come from day one. It need not come from the first day you receive some teachings from your Guru. I think this is very important. His Holiness says that, when His Holiness would give a teaching, then he always makes it clear to the audience that don't feel obliged to sort of take His Holiness as the person's guru. He would make that very clear. In fact, I think this is the right way. I think first, when you are at the teachings, in your mind you could approach it like attending a talk, right? Attending a talk. And then you listen to the Dharma. And then as you go through, as you spend more time in that interaction, if it starts to make sense, if it means something for you, if you can take things from the teachings that affect you positively, that helps you overcome many of the challenges that we all face, that I face, that you face. If it helps that, if the person is helping you do all of that, then gradually I think you will develop a sense of closeness, a sense of appreciation, a sense of respect to that person. And there will be one day when I think you'll go, I think he's my guru, right? Yes. So this is, I think, really what His Holiness means. That because you're in this group, you're part of this audience that starts to do prostrations together, that doesn't mean that you have already started a guru-disciple relationship. No, that doesn't mean. It is not like that. It is only when you really take, like out of your own volition, when you start to take the person as your spiritual guide. And not just any spiritual guide, but this is to enlightenment. That is when the person becomes your guru, right? So I think I just wanted to clarify that point. And then, to those of you who are new to the Dharma, then again, it is always good to read books, to always read books, and then ask senior students when you have some doubts, then perhaps attend talks or teachings, and then think, think for yourself, right? Think. This is the correct way. If you find yourself thinking about the Dharma, if you find yourself thinking about many of the issues that we face, then that is a good thing, I encourage you to do that. It is important to have some form of doubts, From doubts, then when you have some doubts, then it gives you some reason to analyze, If you have no doubts, then why would you analyze, right? Why would you really pursue anything if you have no doubts? So it's good to have some form of doubts. And you can use that to sort of then analyze more and more and check all the sources and ask for people's counsel. So interacting with people, that's also a very good thing, to approach a fellow human being for guidance, for advice. That is something I think that we should start to do more, because I think the West is a very individual society, right? You have a very strong sense of an individual, But as we think more and more, then I think if you think about it, before we start to practice real Dharma, then I think it is important that first we should try to get that level of that strong sense of individualistic feeling. Is that okay? This strong sense of being an independent individual, We should try to maybe decrease that, by a few notches, just a little bit, just a little bit, right? But gradually, gradually. I think this is important. As His Holiness would say, we are social animals, right? Social animals. And this is important, Why I'm saying that is that if you seclude yourself from the rest of society, then I don't think even if you have a wish to practice the Dharma, I think it would be very difficult to truly practice Dharma, right? To truly practice the Bodhisattva path with such a strong sense of individualism. So instead of trying to instead of trying to meditate on bodhicitta to decrease this strong sense of individualism, it is better that first we should work with that problem, with that issue. Because, if I'm not wrong, before you begin the 7-point cause and effect, right? 7-point cause and effect, before recognizing everyone as your mother, before that, I think there is equanimity. So this equanimity, I think, is very important, I think this equanimity, it decreases this strong sense of independent, this strong sense of being an independent individual. So equanimity is very important if you would like to practice this Bodhisattva path, It's very important. Of course, we have the different paths to enlightenment. The Charvaka, Pratitya Buddha, and the Bodhisattva, right? So with this strong sense of an individual, then I think if you still want to practice Dharma, then it might be a good idea to practice perhaps the Charvaka path, I think there is a way for that type of people also. I sometimes question this also, because in Tibetan Buddhism, obviously because of its strong influence from Mahayana, and particularly Vajrayana, we always, emphasize bodhicitta, bodhicitta, bodhicitta. Yet at the same time, we also accept that there is this such thing as the path of the hearers, right? And if there is a path of the hearers, then this is meant for someone who has a very strong sense of being an independent individual, right? So perhaps I think for that type of student or practitioner, then the paths, that is the teachings of the Buddha on the Shavaka path might be more suitable. That's just a thought. But somehow we are always trying to get everyone on board. We are always trying to get people on the Mahayana path. So I think that's why we are always trying to push for this. Push for this and try to make sure that the Shavaka population does not rise. Try to keep that low, and then the Mahayana population should increase. No. Yes. And then, when we approach the Dharma, then again, we have to always think about why we are practicing the Dharma. That is very important. Sometimes we really don't know why we are doing something, right? We might have a vague idea, but we are not so sure about what exactly it is that we are looking for. You might be going, it's like going to the supermarket, and then when you get there, then you're like, why am I here? Right? Right? So I think that could happen, that could happen. If we are not careful, that will happen. Yes. But then His Holiness, in his teachings, I remember, he would say that we should not, when we analyze, we should not sort of have like a predetermined conclusion or like a predetermined purpose. We should not sort of wish for the outcome. When we should not have this wish for a certain outcome when we begin our analysis. Because obviously, if you have that, then you become biased, and then whatever analysis you would do, then you might always come to that point, right? Because you were wishing for that. I think there is a difference, when we say a predetermined conclusion, predetermined conclusion refers to something very particular, right? It's specific. It's not a general thing. When we first start to inquire about the Dharma, when we have this curiosity about Dharma, we should not do so with a predetermined outcome. We should not wish for a certain outcome, right? A specific outcome. But if we do not do that, then why are we analyzing in the first place, right? You could ask this question, right? If you are not wishing for a certain outcome, why even analyze in the first place? So here I think we have to make a distinction. The reason why we are analyzing the Dharma is obvious. It is because we wish to be free from suffering, This is where we begin, because we all, as His Holiness would say and cite from Shantideva's Bodhisattva Charya Vara, Bodhisattva Charya Vatara. We are all equal in the way that we wish to be free from suffering and that we yearn to be happy, right? We are all equal in that. We are all same that way, We cannot differentiate ourselves in that regard. So this is the foundation of our Dharma practice, This is what gives us that push to pursue the Dharma, to think about Dharma. 그만 굽자지. Be careful, yeah. Morning. So, the wish to be happy, it comes naturally, and it is so much a part of us, right? It is a fundamental aspect of our being, is that we always have this wish. We don't need to have reasonings for that, We don't need to analyze to come to this point. We already have this, and this is the base for all, if I may use the term, good and evil, right? Good and evil, or if I may use a more Buddhist term. I'm sorry, this is German, Buddhistic. Okay, Buddhist term. Then I think this wish for happiness is the foundation of samsara and nirvana. The wish to be free from suffering. If you're not careful about this wish, about what you're wishing for, then that leads to samsara. And if you have the right wish, then that could lead to the way out of samsara, nirvana. So this is something that we already have, and that's how we work, right? We have to begin somewhere. So we have to begin with this mind, this wish to be free from suffering. And how can this wish to be free from suffering and wishing to be happy, how can this lead to nirvana? How can that wish lead to nirvana? That depends on making sure that we are wishing for the right thing, But to have this wish for the right thing, it's difficult. It is only through analysis, right? It's only through examining. It's only through dissecting the world, or dissecting ourselves, dissecting our mind, dissecting our emotions. It's only through that we can then really get an idea of what we really have to be free from. It's only through that way. There is no other way. Buddha himself said that he cannot wash away the sins of sentient beings. That he cannot make, that he cannot sort of pull, the suffering of sentient beings as if it was a thorn with his hand. He cannot do that. He cannot sort of give away his realizations, He cannot give away his realizations and just hand it to you. He cannot do this. So then what can he do, right? Then what can the Buddha do for us? He can only show us the path to enlightenment, and he can only by giving us that teaching can he help us in getting free, or he can only help us in freeing us from samsara in this way, only by turning the wheel of the Dharma, only by giving us the teaching. So once he gives us this teaching, then on our part, then we have to think about the teachings. Think about the teachings. So the moment the Buddha has given us the teachings, then he has finished what he had to do. Now we have to finish the job. He started giving us the teachings, and we have to finish that. So I think the teaching on the Four Noble Truths it is the essential teaching. It is the essential point of the Buddha's intent, and you can apply that on so many different levels. Not only in the context of a Shravakayana path, but also in the context of a Mahayana path, and also in the context of Vajrayana path, right? So the Four Noble Truths is very important, and it is something that we should not overlook. It's not something that we should overlook because we have received the highest Yoga Tantra teachings, because we were given teachings on on illusory body or clear light and so forth. We should not overlook that fundamental teaching, if you do that, then then we are losing the base. We are losing the base of our practice. So it's very important that we always, go back to that. Go back to that, and specifically go back to suffering, because that is the first of the Four Noble Truths. Without suffering, there are no truths. Without suffering, there are no Four Noble Truths. So it's always going back to the starting point, and you are the starting point. And right now, not everything is perfect, right? So we have to then work on our issues. Yeah, this is very important. It's very important. Yes. So something that I wanted to share. And okay, so maybe I start to read this verse. So we are on which number? I think we are on number 9. We were on number 9. We are starting 10. Okay. I think yesterday I just read through number 9 and then said I will maybe say a few words tomorrow, right? Okay. Okay. So number 9. Okay. It says in the brackets, having taken refuge, right? I have some doubts, because I think the refuge comes in number 11, if I'm not mistaken. In number 11, I think that's where the refuge starts. Is that right? It says here in verse 11, then I think in the second line it says, "It is certain that the 3 jewels of refuge have the power to protect you from their terrors." Yeah. So I think that's the refuge comes in 11. Yeah. So anyhow, 9 deals with Guru devotion, right? Number 9, verse 9, it's about Guru devotion, and then 10 is about the precious human rebirth, and 11 is taking refuge. Okay. So I think number 9. I don't think I have anything more to add. So now, starting with number 10, the working basis of a human form endowed with liberties is superior to our wish-granting gem. Moreover, such is only obtained this very one time. Difficult to acquire and easily lost, it passes in a flash like lightning in the sky. Considering how easily this can happen at any time, and realizing that all worldly activities are as immaterial as chaff, is that right? Chaff? You must try to take advantage of its essential significance at all times, day and night. I, the yogi, have practiced in the same way. If you would also seek liberation, please cultivate yourself in the same way. So this is about the precious human rebirth. The precious human rebirth, I think this is a very important point. Yeah? It's something that we have to think about, because many of us, we don't realize how lucky we are, how fortunate we are. We don't realize that, We take things for granted, right? We take things for granted, and we look at ourselves, and then we compare ourselves to others, and then we are not satisfied. We are not happy. Many times I think we think like this. So here it is important that you understand your value. You understand how much you are worth. Because if you don't understand that, even I think, generally speaking, in our society, we have this phenomena called, I think, low self-esteem. Yeah, low self-esteem. Yeah. So if you don't think about the precious human rebirth, then I think you will at one point then suffer from low self-esteem. Yeah. So this is very important, to sort of realize how privileged you are, that you really are right now, because you have what it takes to practice the Dharma. You are free from most obstacles that would prevent you from the Dharma, that would prevent your access to the Dharma. You don't have those obstacles, and we have this intelligence, right? The human intelligence. If you look, now with science, obviously our planet and then the solar system, and they're discovering all these new planets or these new places, right? Every year, science is developing, and we are discovering new planets and new things in this vast space. But when was the last time that you heard scientists have discovered life form outside our planet or in a different planet? When was the last time you heard that? No, zero, right? I don't think any of us have like heard that scientists have indeed found life form in other planets. No, right? But we know that this is a huge place. It's a huge place. You can go for millions of miles and you won't encounter a single human. You won't encounter a life form. So this just shows how limited, or the numbers of life form is really minimal when you think about the universe. The life form. It's almost like we are an endangered species. Yeah, it's almost like we are an endangered species. And on this planet, if you think of all the life forms, then human beings, we say what, like 7 billion right now? We are on 7 billion right now, okay? But then if you compare that to ants, we are really, again, like endangered, We are really endangered, yeah. So, being a human, I think, let us not talk about past lives, let us not talk about past karmas, but even, but everyone can accept that, everyone on this planet can accept that he or she is a human being, No one can deny that. So this is a great opportunity, with our human intelligence, we can think, we can analyze, and we can think about, we can remember the past, not just remembering, but we can remember it in greater detail, right? And we can anticipate not just the near future, but we can think of far ahead. We can think. We have this intelligence, and it 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 would be a shame if we just waste that intelligence. If we just waste that and just enjoy life. All life forms try to do just that. They try to enjoy life and try to make sure that they don't come in harm's way, or try to find enough food, good shelter, things like that. This is something that I think all forms, all life forms, or all forms of life forms would naturally do. It's probably embedded in the DNA, right? Something like that. But we human beings, we are more than that. We have this mind. We have this mind, and it has a huge potential. It has a huge potential. So this is what I think this teaching on precious human rebirth is about: is to sort of wake us up, and it's telling us our true worth, and that how much we can achieve the immense potential that we as human beings have. I mean, we say that all sentient beings have Buddha nature, but I think human beings are in a much better place, or are in a better time, or in a better place, or have a better opportunity to realize that potential, than other life forms, even though they may have the same Buddha nature that we have. But for them, it takes more time, because they cannot start that right now, right? They are not in the right moment, but we are in the right moment. This is the moment, This is what precious human rebirth is teaching us. So it is teaching us now is the moment that you take advantage of this privilege, of being a human being. So it's important that we develop a sense of self-worth, a sense of how fortunate we all are. Only then, if you have, and also I think with this teaching, then it also gives us some joy, some feelings of joy. If we are maybe if we are having an off day at work, then precious human rebirth might be a good teaching. If you just take some moment off and think about precious human rebirth, I think it can brighten the day. It can brighten your day. Yes. So, thinking about the precious human rebirth gives us a joy. It then we realize our potential and what we can do with this human intelligence. Then the rarity of finding such a rebirth again is a whole different issue, right? The rarity of finding such a human rebirth. Now, you cannot think about that without thinking, obviously, on rebirth. you would have to first accept the notion of rebirth. So I think here none of us has any problem or doesn't understand or doesn't accept that, none of us here um, doesn't accept that. So there is no need to elaborate on that point. So not just thinking that I'm so fortunate, but also thinking that this is like once in a eon time opportunity, not once in a lifetime, but once in an eon opportunity. Thinking like this, then it gives you an impetus, right? An impetus to practice the Dharma. Impetus to practice the Dharma? Okay. And then the second bit, that how you can lose this opportunity any moment, then gives you an impetus for why you should practice the Dharma now, right? Do not procrastinate. Right? Do not procrastinating practicing the Dharma, right? So this is very important. So when we think of precious human rebirth, then it's important to think about both those two aspects, right? The rarity of finding such a rebirth, such an opportunity. I like to really think of rebirth as an opportunity, the rarity of finding such an opportunity, and the likelihood of losing that opportunity is so high. So thinking on these 2 points, then develops first a sense of wanting to practice the Dharma, and then the second aspect, then it develops an urgent sense of practicing the Dharma, like urgently right now, So this is very important, Now it's almost 11:30, so maybe I thought we can take a few moments off, and just reflect. So this will be like a, if I may call it, a meditation session, because sometimes I'm a little apprehensive of using that term, meditation session, right? Because meditation, if you're not careful with that term, then you could really pull it in all sorts of ways, So maybe we can take a few moments off and reflect on some of the points that we covered. Yeah, so shall we do that? Just a few moments off. Okay, thank you. And now maybe we can start with some questions. Usually, uh, I enjoy the question and answer session uh, more than more than me just talking and talking and talking and talking. You know, I enjoy that more. So yes, if you have some questions, it can be anything. It need not be something that's directly connected to today, but it can be anything. And so, shall we begin?
Hello. I have a question about the value of being out of samsara. I'm currently in samsara, obviously, and I know what is suffering. I sometimes suffer from sickness.
From?
Sickness, being sick,
Oh, sickness. Oh,
and I'm getting old. It's suffering. And in this life, what I can do is being kind to my friends, study Buddhism, practice meditation, and they are very helpful to bring me sense of happiness. But for now, it looks good enough for me. I perhaps don't need to be super happy. Just regular happiness is fine. Then I feel myself is okay staying in samsara. So I'm actually not convinced yet why I have to seek to get from samsara. Please tell me about the value of being out of samsara and why after I have to do that. This is my question.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Crystal. This is a very difficult question. It is. I'm very happy to know that you are helping others and you're bringing happiness in their lives. This is really good to know, and I think um, many people who may be more sure about what their path is, especially like when it comes to enlightenment, they are like, I'm 100%, enlightenment, right? I'm for enlightenment. Yes, like Mahayana, Buddhahood. Many people who would consider themselves Mahayanists, right, on the Bodhisattva path, who have taken many Bodhisattva vows. I think many of them, I think, despite the fact that they've taken Bodhisattva vows, and of course received many Mahayana teachings, I think still when it comes to practically bringing happiness in fellow human beings or fellow sentient beings, then I think they come up short. Yeah, they lack. Something is lacking. Even though they have a very strong ideal, but their practice may be lacking. So I'm happy to know that what you're doing right now, is practical, you know. This is, I think, a very good way to practice the Dharma, you know, to try to apply the teachings of the Buddha to yourself in a way so that you can practice it, you know. The teachings of the Buddha, no high or vast or profound they may be, if it is something that you cannot practice right now, then it is of no use for you, right? It is of no use for you at this moment. So, when we are doing this, when we are working for others, when we are helping others, then I think that's very good, and it is important that we try to help more and more, right? Help more and more. And when you're helping them, there are many different ways to help people. You can, many times I think people suffer from lack of physical conditions, right? So this is one practical way of helping people when they are in need of food and shelter, you know, as we are seeing, you know, in parts of course, this country and you know, countries nearby, there are so many people need help. And that is one very, very good way of helping someone, you know, when they really need help, right? And then you can help, but then not only are they in need of help, but also people who have enough food and shelter, who have enough material possessions, but they're not happy, right? That something is lacking in their life. They feel that despite the fact that they have all of these possessions, something, they feel empty inside, you know? They feel empty inside. So there is also that type of person that needs help, right? So when you help people, then I think regarding your question, then when the Buddha taught about suffering, and why am I laughing when I'm saying suffering? Because I don't realize suffering. When the Buddha gave his teaching on suffering, then I'm sure you're familiar with the 3 types of suffering, so I don't have to explain all of that. But the Buddha, what we have to understand is that when the Buddha was giving those teachings on suffering, the first 2 types of suffering wasn't really the thing that he was trying to get people to be aware of, you know. The first 2 types of suffering is quite obvious, right? The first one is really obvious, and the second one is quite obvious, you know. It's something that we can gradually realize. But then it is the 3rd type of suffering that is really difficult to understand. And if we, not only you, but if I and if everyone that is like me, that is on my level, if we can think more about the 3rd type of suffering, you know, if we can think more about this, then that is where the reason for practicing the Dharma really starts, you know. That's why we need to practice the Dharma. It is not merely to rid someone of their misery. to rid someone of their first two types of suffering, but it's really about the third type of suffering. And first, we have to realize that we are also just as they are, but first we have to realize that we are actually very much part of this. It's not like we are out of samsara and we are looking in samsara. That's not the case. If that is the case, then I would be very happy. I would very much appreciate that, and then I would then ask for your counsel. Yes, yes. But for most of us, that is not the case. We are in this together, right? We are in this together, and so we have to always start and use ourselves. So in some ways, I think you could say Buddhism is quite individualistic that way, because we always have to go back to us, ourselves. That's where we begin. That's the beginning point, because it is true that in the end we are the only one who can really be sure of our existence, right? The other person, we know there is someone, we see a form, but we do not see everything. We cannot experience that. But ourselves, not only are we able to see our physical form, but we can also experience the non-physical, right? So we have to use that as the basis for our developing the renunciation and so forth. For thinking on samsara, we always have to put ourselves in samsara. When we think about the 8 types or the 6 types, we have to sort of visualize that we are taking rebirth and we are sort of endlessly, just roaming and constantly being influenced by desire and anger and ignorance, but specifically desire. So we have to think like this, and if we think like this, then that gives us a reason. That is the reason why we practice the Dharma. As you have mentioned yesterday, as you have reminded us that if we are still focused on this life's pleasures, then why should we practice the Dharma? There is no reason for the Dharma. If this life is all that matters, then there is no need for Dharma, right? There is no need for Dharma. You can say just obey the law, obey the law, and then you can say, oh, I will live in ethical lifestyle, but the standard of ethics is then quite different, from when you think about Dharma, or when you bring in those elements, then ethical conduct then carries a then starts to carry a different meaning. So it's important that we always have to think about the third type of suffering, and in that context, that's where the Dharma starts. Yes, thank you. Oh, yes.
One point of the Buddha's teaching that you mentioned today, which those of us who have been in a Buddhist context and receive Buddhist teaching, the Buddha cannot wash away our sins, our negative karma. I once, maybe you can offer me some debating tips. I once had an argument with a lama of mine, a kind of argument, and my side, somewhere in Buddhist teachings, I've heard I don't know whether it's Hinayana, Mahayana, or Vajrayana, some kind of ripening happens in hearing the teaching. And he held strongly to the point, no, the Buddha cannot, essentially the point, the Buddha cannot take your sins away, you have to do the work kind of thing. And I held strongly to the point there's ripening. Of course, in this ripening, there's a two-way street. I mean, it's an interdependent phenomena. The teacher teaches, and you hear, listen, and contemplate, and hopefully have some realizing. But so I guess my question is, what is your view of this ripening process? Does it exist or not? I mean, is it, for me, it seems like a reason to go to teaching, the purpose to study the Dharma. I mean, whether reading a book or whatever.
Thank you. Thank you. I agree. Yes, there is this ripening process. Yes. But this is interesting, that the Buddha cannot wash away our sins away, right? I think there are stories when, when the spiritual master does something, and then we say, that has made my obstacle go away, Especially in Tantra, we have many stories like that, sometimes. So anyhow, but here we have to make this distinction that it is possible, I think, if the master, has attained a certain mental state, then by sort of, a very good example would be, the relationship between Milarepa and his root guru Marpa, how Marpa, made Milarepa endure all those hardship, right? All those hardship. So, what was, that was done for a reason, right? That was done for a reason, and we would say that enduring this kind of hardship takes away lots of the obstacles, right? Lots of the obstacles. I think that's really interesting. But many times I don't think it is just the physical endurance, but really ultimately I think it is the mental endurance that really does all the work, that really sort of, because Milarepa, sure, he endured all that pain, and lots of the pain was physical, right? But ultimately, it was his mental state. It was the strength of his mind. It was endurance is something I think is quite mental. It comes from here, right? It comes from here. You wouldn't say a tree has endurance, right? Endurance, I think it has to do with really the mind. So, having a strong mind, then sure, with that you can overcome lots of obstacles. And going back to the question, if the master has some strength, then by his physical power, that could change something in you. I believe in this, but I still don't believe that no matter how powerful the master is, no matter how powerful the master is, the master cannot take away our obscurations, they cannot take away and annihilate, obscuration from its very roots. That is not possible. That the Buddha has made very clear. Yes. Thank you. Oh, there is one question over there. Yes. Thế mà tăng sản mà tăng nè, không tăng nè.
Thank you, Rinpoche. It's so nice to see you again. Every time I'm here, I feel like I'm brought into this mandala, and I'm reminded of all this Buddhist concepts. And then I feel like, as soon as I leave here and I'm in this samsara world and doing so many things all at once, it's so easy to forget all the concepts that you talk about. And this is kind of just a funny thought, but I have a serious follow-up. I think with all the sophistication of apps and Apple operating system, there's probably should be like an app in the future that that connects to us, that every time we have desire, ignorance, or anger, that it like shoots us a current and stop us from from having those thoughts and be like reboot our brain or something. And I kind of fall into this millennial trap where I want a quick answer to something, and I feel like we should have some kind of Dharma map. Like if you have, if desire arises, use this antidote. If, your ignorance arises, if anger arises, here's an antidote that you should think about or apply. And I think with like an everyday busy world, I wonder if it's helpful to maybe review like one concept per day as a practice, instead of I feel like it's so the Dharma is so wonderful, but it's so at the same time it's very voluminous, and there are so many concepts to tie in, and it's very hard to tie in and to make, and to remember and to make sense of all the teachings. So I guess I don't even know what my question is, but
yes.
Those are my thoughts.
This is a very good
think.
question. Yes, thank you. I think, if I'm not wrong, giving commentaries, I think there are different types of commentaries, and one is called Nyongti. I don't know how, maybe experiential commentary. I don't know if that's the English word, Nyongti. That's anyway. When the teacher gives you a commentary on a certain point, and then you would meditate on that, and then after some time, then the teacher would ask you, questions, and then you would have to answer, and then in that way the teacher reviews your progress, and if the teacher sees that you have progressed, then the teacher would then give commentary on the next Lamrim point. So there's also this tradition of giving a Lamrim commentary in that way, right? So I think this is what you're saying. It goes very well with that kind of commentary, and with that kind of receiving the commentary, not receiving all commentary, but just receiving on some points, and then spending a few days and just meditating on that point, and then, moving on to the next points like this. Of course, this would take more time, but if you can make that time, then this will bring more benefit. This, I feel that many times with our style, when we go through the Lamrim style, of course, the lamas would always say, in Tibetan we say, Mignam Kyangwa. Mignam Kyangwa. I don't know how to say this in English, but I think it would be something like Kyangwa, to sort of uphold the meditation or something like that. So, like after receiving the commentary, when you're in your room, when you have time, then you have to reflect back on the points that the teacher had covered for that day. This is very important. This is very important because the more time you spend on these points, then stronger the imprint would be. And if the imprint is stronger, then it would be easier for that to materialize back into its consciousness form, right? Otherwise, it just remains as an imprint. So the more you can habituate yourself with these teachings, points, then it would be easier to sort of get back into that mode, when the need arises. I think that's a thought. And going back to your earlier comment on such an app, right, where that might give you a little current or little shock when you have desire or something. I think if such technology does, if they do make such a thing, then I think it will cause lots of discomfort to the owner, constantly being charged. And even, not only would the owner get charged when desiring a good food or pizza or pasta or something like that, but also when desiring or when having the wish to not think of those things, then the person would also get electrocuted. So I think that would be quite difficult, to not have any form of attachment, right? So maybe if the technology was designed, if you could program it so that it will only electrocute you, give you a little jolt, or when you think of spaghetti, that would be better. But desire in general, then I think that might cause too much discomfort to the owner. Yeah. So thank you for the question, and please enjoy your lunch.